Bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone. We're going to jump right into this new roundtable discussion focused on new social rules for companies. We have 54 minutes exactly to debate this question with our panelists, to listen to Xavier RAGOT, and to take your questions in this stifling heat. So let's start with Xavier RAGOT to launch the debate. You're a new member of the Cercle des économistes. Welcome. So you're here. You've got 3 minutes to frame the debate. Thank you, everyone, for being here for this very essential debate on the new social role of companies. I'm impatient to hear our speakers today. Why? Because CSR, corporate social responsibility, is a field in which all companies have been working for many years. It's an important topic. And in the years 2000, it emerged and it was consolidated in 2010. There was a debate at the beginning of the years 2000 on the fear of financialization of capital. There were mergers and acquisitions that were taking place, and there was a will to avoid that short-term yield, which was the term used at the time, dominate with the short-term view by companies. So they wanted to introduce in companies other environmental and social considerations, questions of fairness and equity, so that companies' strategies would take on board these things that are not necessarily in regulations. So the debate on CSR at the beginning was to say, rather than have a lot of regulatory constraints, can we not encourage the stakeholders to be more responsible on the environmental, social, and equity topics, to internalize externalities, and to have more long-term strategies in companies? That was the old world. Today, what I am seeing, and I don't know what the panelists will think, the world has changed. Companies now, given the instability of the economy that we're currently in, the regulatory instability on questions of environmental regulations, geopolitical instability, the emergence of new technologies like AI, the aspirations of certain employees, young ones especially, who have different aspirations and want to have different impacts on societies. I think that a lot of the companies that we're talking to in their human resource management is already dealing with these social questions. And there's been a change on the company side, and I observe this on both sides of the Atlantic, are sometimes ahead on questions, ahead of the lawmakers. There was a European 180 on cars and on environmental questions, but some companies are trying to maintain the targets that they had defined because it was part of their strategy. There are also other lobby groups that are happy about these new regulations. I'm not innocent. But the idea that companies were always below social objectives is no longer true. In the United States, we see Donald Trump's attack on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and this has led some companies to keep these strategies because it belongs to their company identity. So we're in a new world now where social, environmental, equity, gender balance, inclusion questions directly belong to the social questions that companies are dealing with in their daily strategy, and sometimes lawmakers are running behind. I don't know if the panelists will agree, but I'm looking forward to hear how they're managing all of these aspects today. Thank you, Xavier. Thank you to the 5 of you for being here this afternoon with us. Daniel BAAL, you're the president of the Crédit, Mutuel, Alliance, Fédérale, and CIC. Céline BRUCKER, you're the Director General of L'Oréal France. Alain di CRESCENZO, you're here beside me. You're the president of CCI France. Hervé MONTJOTIN, you're the president and CEO of SOCOTEC. And Jean-Roch VARON, you're the president of EY France. As Xavier said very clearly, there's been this movement, the creation of mission-based companies. CSR, we've talked a lot about it in the last decades. But now there's a new word we're hearing about, and that is backlash. We're hearing this on environmental questions, and I'd like to hear you on this. Does it also concern the social role of companies, this question of backlash? But before we talk about what's being unspun or not, I would like to know what you have knit or spun over the last years. So Danielle BAAL at the Crédit Mutuel, you are one of the first mission-based companies, and you adopted societal dividends. The company spent €1 billion in the last few years on this segment. And so what is a social dividend, and what have you done with this? Well, to begin with, we were one of the first and one of the rare big companies to have the status of a mission-based company. This is a French status. So we adopted this in a very consistent manner given the commitments that are ours and have been for a long time. This societal dimension and environmental dimension has been fully integrated in our company. We're a community of men and women, and that we manage. Becoming a mission-based society, this is a status that we adopted after the law was passed, the Pacte law, and it has led us to formalize a certain number of commitments. Commitments that we made for our own cooperative life, commitments we made to our employees and to the social organizations within the company, but also to third parties with societal and environmental commitments, starting with a basic essential principle is that a mission-based company is a company above all. Being a company means meeting the needs and satisfying our customers. It's having a certain level, performance level, working on sustainability and reinforcing our own capital. Once this is said, as one of my predecessors said, to show solidarity, you have to be solid. And in the Crédit Mutuel group, this is a reality. So we have commitments that we have made. And to really illustrate what we're doing, we can have something that is emblematic, that is visible, but also effective, because being a mission-based company is not just a tool for communication. So we created what we call a societal dividend. What is it? It's making the choice to devote each year 15% of our net income to actions that are solidarity-based or to encourage companies so that they carry out high ecological impact or high environmental impact activities. For 2025, this came up to 15% of last year's revenue. That was €4 billion. So it's 610 million euros that we've assigned to the societal dividend. So since you created it, how much have you spent? We started this in 2023. This is our third fiscal year where we're applying it, and in the first 2 years where we were ramping up, we assigned 1 million euros to this. What did you finance? I should give you 3 examples. One is not enough to cover the topic. The first example that I will give is support to companies that have high impact projects. We invest our equity. We don't calculate a return on investment. We look at the impact that they can create. We're working with a company called Neolite that transform what is not recyclable into aggregates that we can use for road construction or for building construction. The second pillar of our action is what we give to our members and customers. We decided to no longer have a health questionnaire for people who are buying their home for the first time, so that there will not be any discrimination, health-based discrimination. So no health survey anymore, so everyone has the right to their loan without an additional cost for the insurance for the loan. The cost of this in 2024, more than 20 million euros. So any person who comes to see you, we go up to 65 years of age. There are age limits, but for a first-time home buyer, generally between 30 and 40 years of age, they could have had cancer 2 years ago. We won't even have to know about that. There is no additional premium they have to pay. And the third one is donations that we make and the support that we give to associations, and we have 150 million euros and we work with Les Restos du Cœur, and I'm glad to see the president here in the first row. So these are three types of actions that we're developing and have developed since 2023. We talk about CSR, we talk about ESG, and to properly measure what we're doing, we've created the Institut Mutualiste de l'Environnement et de la Solidarité, which is today managed by Laurent Berger. And his role is to study the impact of our actions so that he can guide us and give us the correct information to help us make the right choices. So we've created a whole ecosystem for this societal dividend. The fact that we're a French mission-based society is part of our business model, and it can be rolled out at all levels of our group, from our local bank to our subsidiaries who work on finance, banking, and investment. When we talk about social roles, we're also talking about value sharing. So I'd like to hear you, Céline BRUCKER at L'Oréal. This is a topic that you feel strongly about. So how do you organize this value sharing? Can you give us some tangible figures? Very tangible actions, simple ones. We have employee shareholding that we've set up. We have a new plan that was just started last week, and 90% of our employees of L'Oréal France are shareholders of the group. So it makes them actors in the performance of the group, and they can benefit from this. Is this something that you're considering expanding outside of France? Yes. We're going to expand this to other subsidiaries outside of France. It's a micro-society, our company. We look at the health and we try to protect the health of our employees. We've developed a project called Share and Care to provide protection in difficult moments of an employee's life. For instance, in the case of cancer, there's time and specific support for these people. We also have paternity leave now that we're giving, and this Share and Care project allows us to help our supplier partners to deploy it amongst their companies, and we're trying to encourage emulation in other companies so that this can be deployed elsewhere. And for the incentive scheme and participation, we're a generous group, and so we're sharing profits with our employees. It could be entry-level positions, our workers, students. They're paid well above minimum wage. So the incentive scheme can give them 4 months of wages in addition to the wages. So we're continuing to modernize with the evolution of needs of our employees, which is linked with the evolution in society. This is for health. And if they have to support a sick person around them. So your employee shareholding represents how much of the capital? It's 90% of our employees who are shareholders, but I can't tell you what the percentage is. And our relationship with the trade unions, that's really changed things because it's contributed to explaining how the company functions and to allow them to be invested in the performance of the company and on the share value. When you own a share, you want the share value to go up, and you understand how it evolves. And each of us, all the employees are actors in the performance. So we don't know SOCOTEC as well as we know L'Oréal, but SOCOTEC is also a world giant in the testing, inspection, and certification of infrastructure construction projects. Yes, that's absolutely correct. And so you're very active on the question of value sharing. Can you explain what you have done? Yes, I'd be delighted to. Maybe we need to put this in the trajectory of SOCOTEC. SOCOTEC is a company that's 70 years old. We're part of the economic landscape in this for a long time, and it's changed since November. It's tripled in size from 500 million to 1.7 billion, and it's become a global company. It was a leveraged buyout. And the third comment that I have on this point concerning our situation, SOCOTEC, in essence, is a business services and people services. I have engineers, technicians, so we're working in companies with a lot of people. And to comment on Danielle's comments, we want to ensure that performance of the company is always first and foremost. That wasn't necessarily the case when I joined the company. Having a consistent strategy, solid shareholding, and high-quality execution, as well as working on the fundamentals of company culture that are part of a longer period. And it's this performance pathway that allows us to move on questions concerning value sharing. Before you can share value, you have to create value. And this is something that we need to remind people of in France. It's not necessarily very clear always in our country. And what we've managed to do at SOCOTEC is to get the company back into a position of value creation, and then we can talk about sharing value. We share it through very classic tools in pay schemes, in participation incentive schemes, profit sharing and incentive schemes. We saw this develop more. And more originally in a company under a leveraged buyout, we have employee shareholding that we deployed in France last year with a first operation where we got 40% of our employees to invest. It was a real motive for satisfaction because it expresses trust in the company that's changed. It's a test at that time, and we are operating in 26 countries on 7 platforms in Europe and the US, and so we're currently deploying this in the UK and Spain, knowing that with different mechanisms, I have 25% of my employees who are now shareholders. So the lessons learned from this, the company that is focused on their performance in the large sense of the term, shocks are always present, so we have to mobilize to deal with these shocks. Energy transition, environmental questions are a topic. We can see today how global warming is impacting us. We don't have to teach people about that. It's our employees who are asking us what we're doing in these fields. So all of this is here, present on the table on a daily basis in our company, and the fact that we're getting the company on this pathway to performance then allows you to work on value sharing tools that maintain the virtuous circle of commitment that is fundamental in a people-based business. Does the pathway in the company bring all of your employees into this and create commitment on a daily basis for their mission?
You said it, both of you, Sharing value, well, it means first that you need to have values in the first hand, right? Originally. That's the starting point of a company that has citizen values and principles. EY, we're a company of people's business, but also talent business. Our talents need to have performance, but they need to be happy in the company, and both at once goes hand in hand. And our actions address these points for our talents. 8,000 employees. We hire 2,000 employees every year. A lot of interns, a lot of young people, and we help them promote, to help them raise the bar, and to manage their career better inside and outside when they actually go towards our customers. So that's one of our strategies. We try to transmit know-how. We're the best school after school, if we want to say. We train 450,000 staff members. It's like a management school every year for all our employees. And we train them to new technologies, AI, corporate finance. In each of the fields of expertise that we have, we actually educate 8,000 people per year. And I think that for the social role of a career progression purpose, I think it's important and significant. We also have a series of programs around diversity, inclusion. So concretely, what do you do? Well, I'm following up on what was said in partnership with L'Oréal. We work on gender equality, actions to stop sexism on a daily basis, second opportunity promotion actions for the young people to help them progress in life. And we have another program which is called social equity, social equality. To make you understand what it's all about, if you hire two polytechnicians that have the same degrees, if one is the son of a polytechnician and the other one is the son of a middle-class worker, if at the end we'll need to make sure that they will have to acquire some new codes. You talk about the social capital. Yes, because it doesn't stop at the hiring process. We need to develop programs to help them manage their career in a more equitable manner. And also, we have actions. I created a commitment guideline so that all our employees, ladies and gentlemen, because the company does social work. So salaried employees take a pleasure in doing social activities inside the company and outside the company. Last week, first week of July, for instance, 100% of the company had 1 week to take some time and work on commitments with civil society, to meet with underprivileged high school pupils by cleaning streets and venues, and a wide array of activities, actually. So these social commitments, well, one feeds the other, if you want. And often our employees are at the forefront of these initiatives and social actions, and the company is helping, and we are actually feeding this. And in CRESCENZO, we've talked about value creation for shareholders, for employees, but also for territories. Is the social role of a company a driver to enhance and foster territorial value? Well, one should recall that the trade of chambers of commerce is to develop commerce in companies, and for 3 years we've seen that 1/3 of our budget is all about sustaining companies in their transitions from a social, societal, and digital point of view. And that mobilizes, that engages 2,000 people on the field that are operational on the field without forgetting the other functions. So if we reduce the company to the value creation, the economic creation of value, you are the 19th century, right? So now, if you look at the GDP of France, 75% is generated by private companies. If you look at the salaried employees, 21 million comes from the private companies. If you look at the funding of infrastructures, 25% is done directly by companies, and a large share of the 75%, it's actually indirectly done because it's taxes on the companies that feed it. But I'm stopping at the 19th century here, because 20th and 21st century actually have been the venue of revolutions. When you talk about employers and employees contributing, in 900 it was 8%, aggregate number. Now it's 55%. So you see that when in terms of expenditure taken on by the companies, you have an important element that has enlarged. What has happened during the 19th century, during the 20th century, 1936, the week of 40 hours, paid leave, collective conventions, 1945, social security that has created a big band of happiness and welfare for all the employees. And I'm not talking about the 35 hours in 2000 and 1982, the 39 hours. But there was another stage. The other stage is that of the year 2000, and you've mentioned it in your introduction. The company was creating value until then, also had a social role. We can always do better, of course, but there was also a wonderful dimension, that of the societal value and aspect. And when I talk about enhanced social value, everything done by law and volunteer-based activities made by the companies on inclusion subjects. There was a leapfrog in terms of inclusion, in terms of fair salaries between men and women, on the right to employment, on the right to evolve. Do you think that we've talked more about inclusion than we have done in the companies? Because when you look at statistics on these peoples with disabilities in situation of unemployment, well, the statistics are terrible. Yes, they are appalling. But we have to talk about progression margins. Yes, we have a lot of leeway to improve. And you have the relationship towards environment. This was also a political will of the companies. From Second Life, that on CSRD, we were volunteering for it. It's millions and millions that we have invested for CSRD because we want to move forward with it. And I would like to follow up on a question that you have asked that is very interesting. You said, my impression is that companies are ahead of the legislator. And I'm going to ask you a question. Do you know a company that can live for 50 years by making losses? No, that doesn't work. And why are we a bit ahead of time? Because if we want to serve our customers, we need to have employees. We have to respond to their level of requirements. So either you play by the rules and you capture talents and you attract people, or you don't play by the rules, and you no longer are in existence in this world. And the last figures that are striking, we've made a survey on trust and confidence. And this is what is most missing nowadays. Do you have trust in institutions, was the question. That was easy, puff. How many French people said, I trust it? Well, it's 25%. And then we asked a question that was straightforward. Do you trust the world, the corporate world, SMEs and large corporates? 75%. So that means that somehow this movement, which is ours, which is more volunteer-driven, is a movement that is sustainable, in my opinion. Well, this trust that is real and tangible in the survey polls, this is quite incredible when we look at the statistics, doesn't compel you to go towards this moral compass. Maybe it's a driver to have to boost confidence. You were talking about disabilities, and that's an important societal issue. We have chosen to own up to it. We have more than 8% of employees that have declared having disabilities, more than 10% now. We have created a program with long-term positions for employees that are on the spectrum, and we have profiles that would never have found a position because these positions did not exist before. That's very important. As for gender equality, this is something that we have chosen to work for with an adamant stance, and we are one of the forerunners on gender equality and also worldwide, so it's a responsibility that we want to embrace. We talk a lot about what we do in-house, but there's also the important thing is to also have a societal impact for the outside world. We've forged a partnership with Emmaüs, and we've opened charity shops. We have 4 in France. We're about to open a 5th one, and the Emmaüs beneficiaries can choose 3 products for free and have access to aesthetic care. And this is done by the L'Oréal employees, and it's incredible to see how much it boosts confidence when you have access to hygiene and to cosmetic care. Because when you are affected by social headwinds, then you can find dignity again. And a second example is with our brand causes, the Marque Paris, which is the most well-known one in France. Because you said, because you're worth it. This was an important slogan, and we put it into music, and we have talked about social sexual assault, and this is a worldwide problem, and we have launched a program to train everyone to know how to address this problem. This is also an important program that has been supported by our company. We also have a medical niche, dermatological products, and they can be expensive, and there are places where there's a medical desert. Let's talk about pharmacy or doctors, and so via a large consumption brand, we have products under 10 euros for dermatology, and we have a small truck driving around that goes to shopping malls to provide advice, to give some samples and vouchers for products under 10 euros to provide advice to families, for people with skincare problems and families who have also procurement power problems. And this problem is even more acute, and this is why we try to have an impact on society. These are 3 tangible examples. Let's follow up on this Let's follow up on what 2 of my neighbors on the left-hand side have said earlier. The society needs to face these transition problems, environment, digital, AI, and sovereignty as well. There's another one, that's the demographic issues, because we are entering an era where we have a generation gap that is sustainable. And we also have political data that is contradictory on immigration. For instance, I work in Germany much more, and the equation is impossible to deal with. So facing that, especially when you have a people's business or a talent business, you have to ask yourselves, how can you attract the resources you need? And this is where the societal issues impact you and strike you. I think that this is irrelevant to ask yourselves not the right questions, because a company that needs to bring talents need to deal with that. There is no choice, and I spent a lot of time in a company that was more traditional in terms of recruitment. Well, if you want to find plug-and-play employees from a competitive company that will start on a Monday morning with the same job, this time is over. We have to develop our own resources. I'm hiring 2,500 people a year. 1,500 of whom are in France. We have launched training programs in our industry. We hire 150 to 200 apprentices a year. This is something we wouldn't do in the past, and that requires a lot of efforts from managers because we have to tutor and mentor them. But there's a lot of pride coming out of it, and this is what is imposed upon. It is self-evident. And the other comment I wanted to express is that from the societal point of view, Jean-Roch is right. It's also a matter of a bottom-up approach. When the company is in the right momentum in terms of performance, because the first responsibility is to create value in the widest meaning of the sense, very quickly your employees will ask you to report on the fallout, on the domino effect of the positive aspect of this. They won't express it in these words, but fundamentally this is the gist of the message. We are not L'Oréal, but what we've done is that we've launched a program that consists in, well, because personally I'm always committed to integration via employment, because the first element of dignity is to work and to look for people that are far away from the employment market. So to go to underprivileged neighborhoods, we do that with Sport dans la Ville Association, which is a formidable association. Via this program, we have reinserted 300 young people at our scale. It's a lot. And it's over the span of 4 years. And we managed to put them back on tracks with mentoring, with training. Some have helped them to pass the driving permit, to learn things like being on time, because some social problematic people have lost view of that. And that's very powerful for the company because it requires a lot of efforts from the technicians and managers because they play a role for which they were not prepared. It's a matter of tutoring, of mentoring. But fundamentally, it's also an element of massive pride. And another element on which I would like to insist is that it seems to me that as a business leader, as a business owner, since there is a trust agreement which is strong, a trust pact, and I feel it, it's a collective framework that is sustainable in a period where a lot of collective pacts are being weakened. I think the role of a business owner is to hold it together, to know how to combat and to fight against sovereign individualism, because we know that there's a lot of contradictions. They are willing to have a framework, but they're also in line with their era. And so they say, I want to do whatever I want, whenever I want. And sometimes this is an illustration of our era. And from the get-go, I'm straight in my boots. I think that the collective values are important, and if we let it weaken, become weaker, then people are going to criticize us, and rightfully so. Do you want to make a remark and to follow up on this? No. And then Daniel BAAL and Jean-Roch. Yeah, I would like to follow up on this, because it is true that today, and I've said it earlier, the corporate world is the human community where people are closer to one another and they can have discussions, lively discussions. And it's an important transformation took place in most of the companies. Of course, there's a lot of things to do yet. It's easier when you are in well-structured large corporations where we manage to organize things and to feed the dialogue and discussions. I would like to follow up on the pride that was mentioned earlier. It is wonderful when employees can say that they are proud to work for that company. We talked earlier about the societal dividends when we launched this concept. We had prepared it ahead of time, obviously, with our directors. And when we announced it, there was a spontaneous momentum coming from employees saying, this is formidable, this initiative is great. it is even more meaningful and it gives more meaning to our work. And when we created the mission-driven company, we had to agree on a raison d'être. We had to agree on the missions that we wanted to set ourselves. We worked with social partners, but we expanded the scope and we actually consulted all the teams working for us. And it was a very wonderful, fruitful discussion we had, because when we talked about the different objectives, actually it was striking because many people said, we don't understand, be more straightforward. And we have, when we talk about listen and act, we needed to actually have very concrete and tangible actions rather than fighting against any type of discrimination inside and outside, or to have a full-fledged environmental approach, or to have a real full-fledged solidarity approach, or to drive for the performance growth and to assist performance growth inside and outside the company. And I think that's one of the strongest and the most important and efficient transformations we can have in a corporate world. And also, when we talk about the banking and insurance sector, it's very hard to hire. In auditing and supervision sector as well, when we talk about IT, there's a competition that's so vivid. And if the company has values and showcases these values, then it's important to strengthen an asset for attractiveness, and we have a strong employer brand. This is a version, a very rosy aspect of it. But do you fear? What about what's happening in the US? You've seen everything happening against the political decision makers and diversity. Maybe it will go through the Atlantic. Do you see this looming over your head?
Aux États-Unis.
In the US, you're obliged to do what the person in the White House tells you to do. Is this a movement that could cross the Atlantic? Thank you for the question. Now, more seriously, in our company, we don't do politics at EY, and we don't take those militant positions. We work on topics of diversity, inclusion, and we consider that our employees, if they're happy, if they're enjoying their lives in their diversity in the company, they're happy, they're doing their job well. So we always come back to the same point. Diversity and inclusion is a value. It's not a policy. And at EY, we're continuing with our inclusion policy. You can do it without talking about it. We're doing it, and we continue to talk about it. And we're continuing our policy of inclusion and diversity with the very human values of inclusion for the well-being of our employees, because we think it makes them happier and they work better. Is the backlash a fantasy? I don't think so. And there's a real usage case that we're seeing. If you open the paper yesterday, on remote working, you saw that there's a fight between big French companies and their employees to get them back into the office. And I think we can improve things if we need to. But I don't think it helps to go backwards. Each time we go backwards on big developments, it's because they led to loss of social benefits. A recent 180 that was brought forward and then pulled back. Socially, it was not supportable in the farm world to have to buy new cars, so they got rid of those emission requirements. We talked to our companies, our small companies, SMEs, and they have less ability to invest. And we asked them, what are your challenges? Give me 4 significant challenges that you have for the future. The first one that they gave to us is the challenge of employment. How can we recruit and maintain employees? The things that the SMEs are working on with, number 1, and home life balance. Point 2, developing skills. Point 3, flexibility of working hours. And point 4, new technologies. Those are their challenges. The second challenge, environment. And the verbatim is my company will be green or it won't be. So if I want to recruit young people, if I want to do business, if I don't show my societal and environmental effort, I won't be able to sell my products. The third challenge, technology and human hybridization. We asked them, what is the last challenge? Sharing values and governance. And this leads me to another life, which is mine. I did a survey in the cooperative world. It's a model that's quite unknown amongst our companies. If we talk about cooperative values and we explain it to young people, 3 out of 4 say they want to work in that field because there's values, they're sharing, there's governance. So when you reach that level, my friends, and COVID led to an explosive change, it's impossible to go backwards now. So either you adapt, or people won't come and see us and we won't have any customers. I think you agree, Danielle. I can't see going backwards because what we built within the company, with our employees, with the board members. And if we want to go back on our decisions, in-house, the employees would not like it, and it would have an effect on their motivation and on their performance. I am convinced today that values, plus the values that we create, and that we need to share all of this, values and value creation. We can no longer challenge this. I agree. I don't think we'll come back on this topic. We talked about values, but it's also a wealth. Diversity is a real strength for us. If I don't have teams that represent the 40 million French people who buy our products, we won't be relevant. So the question of relevance is important. Sensitivity, the empathy that you have to be correct, it comes from this inclusion. There's also the age question, and everything that I'm proud of is that AI could exclude, and we're ensuring that everyone is embracing this technological breakthrough. We want to make sure that we're not leaving anyone by the wayside. We have 80,000 people working for a company across the world, and we've already trained 45,000 of them to use AI, and we're going to train them all in the end. So we have to see this as a strength. We're going to continue. We're not going to change anything. We want to ensure that our teams follow along with the societal demands as much as possible. Xavier, your enthusiasm and your exemplarity is really refreshing, and it's something we need today. But what intrigues me in the French debate, when we look at the figures, France stands out because of the poverty of its labor, its social dialogue. It's intriguing. I'm talking about, for instance, the conclave on our retirement program. It's hard to get the different parties across the table to speak to each other. So what are your expectations for the different bodies of government so that what you're doing can have an effect that goes beyond your company? Do we need to educate? Do we need to support? Do we need to make a fiscal effort, a tax effort? What is your expectation? Well, just to comment on the retirement conclave, it failed, but maybe the real topic was before. We should have been talking before. There wasn't enough dialogue before the meeting. So what we can expect from the state is that they not necessarily get involved, but they facilitate dialogue. They need to facilitate the activity of companies. And I don't know if everywhere in the state, everyone is always active on these topics. Alain, would you like to say something? What isn't working is that you're putting people into a box and you say, regardless of how complex the topic is, in 2 months you have to find the solution. Are we capable of doing that? That doesn't work. So on the reform of our pension scheme in France, it seemed, don't get angry with me. It seemed natural until the day that I drove up into the mountains and I listened to a co-worker in a group that I know very well, and she was explaining why we were wrong, why we made a mistake. She said, the problem isn't 2 more years of working, it's years of life in good health. Underlying that is a societal question. The difficulty of work. Why does it take time? It's because we missed that. And I think we're missing it because we're not giving ourselves the time to seriously deal with this topic. And these are topics that we need to work on, not just with union representatives. We need philosophers. We need doctors. We need to work on the topic as a whole, and so we're not giving ourselves enough time to do this, and it's a shame. And social dialogue is something they do every day. The conclave was not social dialogue. It's when you're in your company in front of your employee representatives that you're talking. That's real life. That's where things take place. And that's where we can do great things. That's where we can get people to buy into our ideas, into what is giving us life, which is the company. If you allow me, very quickly, because I'd like to allow people to ask questions. It's not because the national format doesn't work, but it says something about social dialogue within companies. A company that is doing well is a company that has social dialogue within it. Secondly, you were looking at reality in rose-colored glasses. That's wrong. What we're doing is not easy. It's not because the end result and the stories are nice to tell. These are efforts that we make every single day. Thirdly, for the U.S., I go there a lot. It's my number 2 country in terms of setup. It's a federal country, so between the announcements that are made that can have an influence on public ordering, what happens in the States can be different. You can't even imagine the gap. So I think these topics, these announcements, we talk a lot about them in Europe and less in the U.S. And the reality is the capacity to get people and resources to come to you. We have 3 minutes. A quick question. And we can take a second question. Thank you. My name is Fernando Morales. I'm a journalist, and I live in Strasbourg. I have a question for everyone here, even for the audience. How many companies in the CAC 40 have 0 children working? How many in the FTSE 100 have 0 child labor? How many in the Fortune 500 have 0 child labor? The answer is 0. I don't have any precise figures, but today, with all of the due diligence that we have to do as big companies, I want to say for my company, it's 0. I'm sure that others could provide the same answer. Same for us. I can prove that's not true. Sir? You talked about a survey on trust in companies, and I heard that 75% of French people trust companies. If we'd ask the question, do you trust companies, listed companies in the CAC 40, some of whom do not pay their tax, any tax, while you have to pay tax, would you have got the same answer? That's not my only question. I think that today you seem very attentive to the consequences and social and environmental emergencies. But it's difficult to believe that's true when you're refusing any increase in company taxes, whereas many years ago the company tax rate was much higher. Shareholders happy with, used to be happy with 3 to 4% return on investment, and now they need 10 to 13%. For what reason? Would anyone like to answer? You have a minute. I'll answer. The survey included CAC 40 companies. So for all companies, 75, and for those listed on the CAC 40, it's less than 50%. So yes, it goes down. But sir, I didn't talk about the profits of big companies working on different continents. I was talking about 99% of companies. Margins go down, profits go down, and people want their salaries. And I would never bring into competition 40 companies versus 5 million. I'm not saying they're not virtuous, but never extend the reasoning that concerns 40 companies to 5 million. Well, thankfully, in France, we do have those 40 listed companies. Xavier, a conclusion? No, I was happy to hear about all the tools that these companies are using, but there's a point about the heterogeneity of companies, the quality of social dialogue also. That's a fact in the companies. There are lots of things we can do to work on this. We've heard examples that can stimulate public debate on the things that we can do in this framework for the quality of social dialogue. So I think that there are improvements we can make in France. Thank you. Thank you all.
Continue.